witness that there is a God, Allah, who came to us in the person of Master Fard Muhammad, to whom praise is due forever. I bear witness that the most honorable Elijah Muhammad is the exalted and living Christ, and now Mahdi at the right hand of the Savior. And I bear witness that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is the Messiah in our midst in this day of judgment in which we now live. It is in their names I come before my family in the greeting words of peace and paradise. Once again, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Walaikum salam, sir.
Again, it's wonderful to see your smiling faces, even though I can't see them. I know they're smiling. And I pray a lot of this topic flows. As always, it's by divine inspiration, giving thanks and praise to Allah for all things. And I pray a lot we can get something out of it. It's going to be a kind of straight wire once again. I'm quite sure we will have some cognitions. We may go back on our time track. We may pinpoint and identify some things perhaps that we haven't seen before, but that's part of the healing. Once we can see it and once it becomes obvious, then part of that charge has already reduced, as we've been taught through the tech given to us by L. Ron Hubbard. But before we get started, is there any old business, anything we need to clear up from the past regarding the tech, mathematics, science, or any concepts we need to clear up before we go forward? Anyone? If not, we will go ahead and just roll forward. All right. Praise be to Allah. Brother Ahmad, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
And I think I saw Sister Jocelyn. Assalamu alaikum, sister.
Alaikum salam, sir, and family.
All right. So let's jump right into it. Okay. I think by now this ayat is self-explanatory. The goal is to find the tech. Allah has already given it to us. And through the guidance of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, we continue to strive to make the marriages so we can take the tech and put it into that fine language that we know. Specifically tonight, we're going to be dealing with the concept of chains. I'm trying to think where this idea first came up. It came up a while ago. But as we were studying chains and then reading in the Holy Qur'an, there's many points in the Holy Qur'an that mention chains. And I said to myself, there has to be a correlation. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a comparison with the help of Allah between the chains of Dianetics and the chains in the Holy Qur'an and see if we can find some points of correspondence. Whereas the Dianetics gives us a certain level of understanding, but the scriptures given to us by Allah through the Holy Qur'an will actually take our understanding even further. And I believe with the help of Allah, I'm gonna present a couple of ayats just to present them, but there's one in particular that stood out. And I personally thought it was so profound, not because of Brother Lukman, but because I believe this tech it was already in the Holy Qur'an. And this is just one of many ayats that Allah has blessed us to receive that would support that thought. So what we're going to deal with tonight is we're going to go into the concept of chains from a Dianetic standpoint. We're going to look at the connection between engrams, key ins, key outs, lots, and secondaries, and we're just going to touch them briefly. I'm going to use a spider web again in a different context this time. This spider web to illustrate the concept of the engram, the key in, the key out, and the locks. And then we're gonna look at a couple of places in the Holy Quran where the word chain is found. And then we're gonna deal one ayah in particular, and it's gonna take us to, I think, a higher level of understanding of the tech. And I think it'll give us a greater appreciation, not only for the tech and for the Holy Quran, but a greater appreciation for the wisdom that we already have, that we just need to dig a little deeper into what we have, and we'll realize, and this is my humble opinion, that our wisdom is the fulfillment of all this, especially the fulfillment of the tech. So I believe, this is just Brother Lukman speaking for himself, I believe we have the wisdom that will be instrumental and influential in the upper parts of what they might call the OT levels. I think we have it in our supreme wisdom and our teachings. And then we're gonna just verify, can we find a marriage between the tech of Dianetics and the Holy Quran? Because if we can find these connections, the more connections we can find, then our Holy Quran becomes an auditing book. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Our Holy Quran becomes a book of straight wire. Our Holy Quran becomes a book of lock scanning. Everyone follow? Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Praise be to
Yes,
Allah.
sir.
And I think, Brother Wadu, I think you're going to appreciate where this is going to lead us. And again, I always value your opinion. I value everyone's opinion, but particularly dealing with the medical field, there's some information that's going to come up. Feel free to expound or take us a little bit deeper into what's going to be presented. We start out with the word allegory. And I start here because of the ayat that's in the Holy Quran, where it says, "He it is who revealed the book to thee. Some of its verses are decisive. They are the basis of the book, and others are allegorical. Then those in whose hearts is perversity follow that part of it which is allegorical, seeking to mislead and seeking to give it their own interpretation. And none knows its interpretation save Allah. And those firmly rooted in knowledge, they say, we believe in it. It is all from our Lord, and none mind except men of understanding." And I start here, and I'm going to bring some more supporting information here. It is my honest opinion that the reason why we're giving rules of interpretation is that there's nothing that says we can't go into the Holy Quran to find the wisdom that Allah might reveal it to us personally. And I'm a firm believer that as we go into the Holy Quran, it is a method of communication where we receive a personal connection to Allah. And that these rules of interpretation give us the guidelines. Now I'm going to use the words of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan to support my statement. But if there's rules of interpretation, then in my humble opinion, there's nothing wrong going into the scripture to find the jewels that we can find. And the rules are, one, we can't have perversity in our heart. We can't go into the scripture with the thought that we want to put ourselves out front. We can't have a desire to mislead, and we don't have a desire to give it our own interpretation. So there's three elements here that are all connected: perversity, seeking to mislead, and seeking to give it their own interpretation. As we all know, as we go into the Dianetics in the Holy Quran and we find the marriages, our idea is to connect it to what the minister has already given us and find these unions. So we are looking to go beyond the rules of interpretation and make the connections in a way not to mislead, but in a way to guide us into a deeper understanding of the tech and the Islam that we believe in. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So an allegory, by definition, is the expression by means of symbolic fictional figures and actions of truths or generalizations about human existence. Okay, so its allegory is symbolism. Allegory is symbolism. So it's a symbolic representation. The Arabic word for allegory it comes from the root word shabaha. The root word is shabaha, and that word means a resemblance, a likeness, or a picture. The word tasbih means allegory, simile, or parable, and tasbih is derived from the same root word. So allegory, the root word itself is connected to allegory, simile, or parable. So now we're going to break down what each one of these represent. A simile is a figure of speech comparing two unlike things that is often introduced by the words like or by the word as. So when you look so the word as means to the same degree or amount. So when you look in the Holy Qur'an where it says, then your hearts hardened after that so that they were like rocks, rather worse in hardness, that's considered to be a simile. So Allah is using the word rock to represent hardened hearts. And then when you break down and go and study rocks, I guess that would be the science of rocks would be geology. If you go into what's called a geological theology, and you want to study rocks, that will lead us into a deeper understanding of the heart, which represents the mind. So, like we were told when we were children, your head is hard as rocks. Is that right? Or you're hard-headed. Okay. So
Yes, sir.
that's the example of a simile. Something is like something else. When you look at the word as, for as the lightning cometh out of the east and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. This is a simile. So lightning is being used as lightning shineth or cometh is being used to represent the coming of the Son of Man. Now, if you go into the study of meteorology, and if you study lightning, you go deeper into the study of lightning, it's going to take you into some information that will actually teach you more about the Son of Man. Now, I'll give you one example. When lightning strikes, the purpose of lightning striking is actually to convert nitrogen, which is in the atmosphere. The lightning strikes produces an excessive amount of heat that converts the nitrogen into a gas in which it can be absorbed into the water, the rainwater. And then the rainwater transports that nitrogen down to the soil to produce growth for plants. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So there's a reason for the lightning striking. The lightning converts gaseous nitrogen and allows it to dissolve so they can be transported to give life to the plants. It's interesting that when lightning strikes, it is approximately 50,000 degrees. So when you talk about 50,000 degrees, we're talking about, we could also look at that as a period of 50,000 years, that one would come and convert heavenly information into a form that could be absorbed by the believers. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So the study of lightning can be seen as a simile, but it also can be seen as a picture or a parable to represent the coming of Master Fard Muhammad. When you look at a parable is usually a short fictitious story that illustrates a moral attitude or a religious principle. In other words, it's a picture in words that contains a moral or religious truth. That's a parable. It's a story that illustrates a lesson in the form of a picture. So when we look at the problems in the problem book by this same concept, the problems in the problem book can be seen as parables illustrated through the language of astronomy, mathematics, and physics. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In Closing the Gap, page 19, one of my favorite spots in Closing the Gap, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan states, he says, now let's look at the quality of the persons with whom the master first dealt. What was their condition? They were totally in the dark. They were a very ignorant people. Master Farah Muhammad, to whom praise are due forever, taught them in a language that was the way you teach babies. You teach babies using words that conjure pictures. Now, based on that definition, when you look at words that conjure pictures, can we say that he taught us through the use of parables?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when we read our Supreme Wisdom and when we read our problem book, can we say that Master Farad Muhammad is still teaching us through parables?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Words that conjure pictures are allegory, similes, parables, and metaphors. So all throughout the Supreme Wisdom in the problem book, we're going to find allegories, similes, parables, and metaphors. So why? Why is it that we would be taught through the language of pictures? Minister Farrakhan says the picture is not the truth, but the truth is contained in the picture. But as long as the picture remains in the brain, as you mature in understanding, then you can reach into the picture and extract the principle of truth that lies therein. So by memorizing our Supreme Wisdom, by memorizing the problems in the problem book, we formulate these images in our mind. And the fact that we have this memorized by heart, then when we go, every time we go over the picture, we find more and more information. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
In Dianetics, they say what? Go back to the beginning, go over it again, and pick up what additional data you can contact. Well, if we keep repeating the attributes of Allah, if we keep repeating why isn't the devil set on the best part of the planet Earth, if we keep repeating the problems of the problem book, the more we repeat it, the more information Allah will reveal to us. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And this is one of the reasons why we need to memorize. But we can't memorize and then stop at memorization and think we got it. Because because we have it memorized doesn't mean that we understand the wisdom that's in that individual or particular lesson. So the picture becomes a well. This is how it came to mind. The picture becomes a well. And the more we study, the more water or understanding we can extract from that well. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. And Brother Lukman,
Go ahead, Sister Sharon.
something keeps coming up in my mind, learning how to learn
Mm-hmm.
for some reason. Learning how to learn is with just repetition.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In the martial arts, that's one of the main reasons why you do kata. You do kata, and you know you're not going to, if you get into a dispute with someone, you know you're not going to fight them according to the kata, but that kata is made up of chains. Since we're using the word chains, it's made up of a chain of blocks and punches. And so that the more you do it, the more you do that kata, these strikes and blocks become muscle memory. The same thing is through repetition. It becomes muscle memory. There's a concept I had to study. I'm preparing for another test I have to take, and it's called the cycle of competence. This might become the topic of another Zoom meeting. Has nothing to do with the Dianetics, but it was something that came up in the study. And that at the last part of the cycle of competence, they call it unconsciousness competence, or unconsciousness competence, meaning you do things based on muscle memory. You do it automatically. So it's learning how to learn. We want to learn in such a way. Minister Farrakhan used the word extemporaneous. If you remember that word from Closing the Gap, where you can wake him up in the middle of the night, give him a topic, and he says he can teach for a minute, an hour, a day, because that's the way Allah has shaped his mind. Is that right? So in dealing with the well, the verse came to mind, but whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. Now notice where this verse is saying, where is the well located? Where is this well located?
Inside self.
The well, based on this verse, the well is inside us. So when it says, the kingdom of God is within, this well of everlasting water is contained within us. It's based on our study. So the minister's words, that's the well. And the water is the teaching of the Most High Elijah Muhammad. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
And the more we study, the more water comes from within ourselves based on what we study of the words of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, which are rooted in the teachings of the Most High Elijah Muhammad. Go ahead, Brother Wadud.
Assalamu alaikum, sir, and
Salam.
family. As you're teaching on the picture, I'm thinking of that adage that goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Yes,
and
sir.
then the repetition and looking at a picture, the more you look at a picture, you can focus on or see something into each picture, that it says one thing, and then as you focus on a particular aspect inside of that picture, you may pick up on something else. I'm thinking, as I see your background, that it's noted how Master Fard Muhammad is appearing or reading down, and that's something that was drawn from the picture, that he doesn't show us his full face, but you can only see that profile of him looking down. And so I'm just thinking a picture is worth 1,000 words, because there's so many nuances inside of the picture.
Yes, sir. Most definitely. Most definitely. Now, also, with regards to that picture, besides the image of Master Fard Muhammad and besides the Holy Qur'an, what other significant item is in that picture? At least it was significant for me when I was looking at it. What else is in that picture?
He has a pen in his pocket.
He has a
Take notes.
pen. Teach men by the pen what men do not, correct?
Mm.
So the minister says, I believe in my extemporaneous teaching of his teaching that God was already beginning to open up to me the inner or esoteric meanings of the teaching, that it seemed like other ministers would only teach what he taught. They seemed to be afraid to dig into his words to find all the jewels that were in the word. But I call that intellectual cowardice, wanting to be safe, but now wanting to explore the depth of what this man had gotten from God. So I decided I was not going to do that. I was going to dig into the teachings and expose that which God showed me. So in this, I lay the foundation with this, so that the foundation upon which marrying the supreme wisdom with the supreme tech and the Holy Qur'an really comes from this aspect of closing the gap, that each of us, when we study, if we find jewels, it's not so much we found the jewel, it's Allah has given us the jewel. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So the more we study and the more we find a higher understanding of the scriptures of the Holy Quran or higher scriptures of the teachings, then that is, in my humble opinion, a personal connection to the Savior. We are receiving teachings from Allah in a way of putting the teachings in the language that we know as the little Jesus, little J, or little Messiahs, little M, to assist the Messiah with the big M and the Jesus with the big J. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Brother Frank, I see your hand up.
Yes, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
All right, I just wanted to comment on William when he made that comment about Master Fard Muhammad and Sister Sharon. I just received Brother Minister Willie book, 38 Practical Methods of Study, the 38 Practical to use to study the teaching of Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And on page 18, right in the last paragraph, he said, remember the only picture we have of Master Fard Muhammad is of him reading the Quran. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said that the master had that picture taken of himself deliberately. So, I mean, that was some jewels when I read that. I said, you know, that's the only picture we got, and master deliberately had that picture taken. And like you said, he's got his eyes in the book, and he got that pen there to take notes if he have to, or continue to write in our minds. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. That's the only picture that we have. But I have a table talk that mentions there was actually two pictures, one of which was given to, I believe, one of the brothers of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And it was a picture of Master Fard Muhammad at a chalkboard. I believe it was doing calculus or doing some mathematical equations. But I've never seen it. But in one of the table talks, I believe it was mentioned. I would love to see that one, but you're right, brother. That's the only picture, even though there's some fakes out there, that's the only picture that I remember that we have received. Sister Deborah, then we got Sister Francine, and then Brother Ahmad. Go ahead, Sister Deborah L.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
There are two things that I would like to add to the conversation, if I can. And
Yes,
one
ma'am.
of them is the introductory letter to the lessons that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan had. It was a letter that he had written prior to putting out the lessons in a book form. And he said that he desired that we read these lessons over and over and over again. I think he said it 4 times. And he said that in doing so, that this will, one, it will lock up the 66 trillion years of rebellion that, you know, was in us. It would also open up the door to the hereafter. It would unlock the hidden meanings of the Bible and the Holy Qur'an. And so he's telling us that the repetition of the reciting and memorizing these lessons, how it will rewrite, if you will, the programming that is in our minds. And on September the 17th of last year, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said, in reference to the instructions to the laborers, he said that when it says about official paper, all students of the University of Islam must use official paper for their lessons at all times. He said official paper in this sense, he said it is the faculty of memory. And so when we're talking about when you're doing something over and over and over again mentally, you're actually reprogramming, if you will, rewriting over an existing program that's in the mind. These lessons, in my opinion, are a programming language, not unlike the programming language of a computer, that are designed to rewrite over the mind, because in the Our Savior Has Arrived, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that Master Fard Muhammad, or that it will require a new education for Allah to make all things new, in that chapter. And he said that first it will begin on this wise. He said the righteous will eat only one meal a day or one meal every other day, physical. And we know that that has something to do with the brain and clearing up brain fog when you change your diet. And two, he said that we'll have a new education, but this new education will begin by planting an idea in the mind that prepare the mind to receive the new teachings. So we're talking about a mind job, and we're also talking about a reprogramming of the mind. And so I bear witness of what you're saying.
Praise be to Allah. Thank you, Sister Deborah. I really enjoy when believers can produce verifications, because it helps me to understand that we're all on the same page with the same spirit going in the same direction. So thank you very much, Sister. Sister Francine, you have the floor.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
The sister that is restoring the Elijah Muhammad house, she said that an older brother had came to her and gave her the original picture of Master Fard Muhammad when he was reading the Quran. And actually, if you look at the picture, he's actually sitting down. And if you look at the original picture, you can see more of black features in him.
Really?
Yes.
Hmm.
She said it was an older brother.
Mhm.
She said he just came from out of nowhere where they was at restoring the house.
Mhm.
And she said he just came up to her, went in his top pocket and pulled out the picture. He didn't say a word, nothing to her. He just went in his top pocket and just pulled out the picture and gave her the picture. And you could see like he was sitting you could see that he's sitting down. And like his part is different from the picture that we have of him. I guess it's a drawing that we have of him now, but the part is different. His hairline and everything is a little bit different from what we have now.
Mhm.
Yeah, so
All right, thank you,
I
Sister
found
Fran-
that was interesting.
Okay. Thank you, Sister Francine. Brother Ahmad, you have the floor.
Assalamu alaikum,
Walaikum
everyone.
salam.
Yes, in regard to the table talks, I have that series, and that second picture the messenger said was a picture of Master Fard Muhammad working square roots.
Square roots. Yes, thank you, brother. Square roots. That's exactly what it
Great.
was. Square roots.
Praise be to Allah. Yes, sir. I know that detail can be important
Yes.
to crack the right atom. So praise be to Allah.
Yes, because when you deal with square roots, you're dealing with taking a number and getting to the root of that number which produced it. And there's a lot of Islam in the study of square roots. So thank you for that point of clarification, brother. I appreciate it.
Praise be to Allah. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, yes, sir. Sister Angela, you got the floor.
Assalamu alaikum.
Now,
Happy Savior's Day.
Did you plan on having the same color as my background, or is that just a psychic thing?
That's just what it is, brother. It's look, one mind, and that's what we bear witness to right now. By Allah's grace and mercy, assalamu alaikum, family, and happy Savior's Day again. When you first started, Brother Lukman, just like with Sister Sharon, it became very clear what causes the enemy to call television programming. And if we pay attention to television and we pay attention to programming, we notice that it is very repetitive. So much so that we can hear a sound and it'll take us to when we were 3 years old. Talk about that chain, right, brother?
Mhm.
And now we can see the importance. Evil is fair seeming in this dispensation of time at an all-time high right now. And what's making it so fair seeming is the pre-programming. to accept it. So flipping it to the other side takes us to closing the gap. I believe on page 54, when we're talking about our lives we lived prior to Satan was about worship to Allah. Everything we did was in reference to Allah, worship to Allah. So imagine if our programming or repetition was all 24/7, like Final Call Radio, which is a blessing for those of us that really understand. Imagine if we took in these teachings 24/7, because we all, and us here on the Zoom, most of us have in common the result of being in concentrated study repetitively every week. So we can see exactly how the Holy Qur'an is straight wiring us, because it's you're making us come to a question. What exactly is in our minds or in this well you just spoke of? Because to me, the well is the mind, and a chain to this well is basically how we go get the water, right? When you go to an actual well, like you say, priming the well, you need the bucket on the chain, got to drop it down, get the water, and take it back where you take it to. The chain, from how I'm seeing it right now, because the chain is the events that leads to up and down a time track. It is grouped with engrams. I don't want to go ahead. Am I going ahead? I want to do that. I'm
No,
gonna right there.
we're gonna get there.
I want to. I'm a student. Come on.
That's where we're leading up to.
Well, then go ahead. Then. Praise be to Allah.
That's what we're leading up to. All right. So the question is, what is an allegory from a Dianetic perspective? Does Dianetics use the concept of allegories? They call them mock-ups. Now, what is a mock-up? The Dianetic Dianetic Technical Dictionary calls a mock-up, it's an imaginary picture. And he says a mock-up is more than a mental picture. It is a self-created object which exists as itself or symbolizes some object in the mesh universe. He says it's a full perceptive energy picture in 3 dimensions created by the thetan and having location in space and time. So question is this: does the word allegory and metaphor and simile, as we have just discussed, does it correspond to a mock-up in Dianetics?
Yes, sir.
So we have another marriage between the supreme wisdom and the supreme tech. So we can say some of its verses are allegorical and some of its verses are decisive. We could technically say some of its verses are mock-ups, because some of the ayats of the Holy Qur'an are 3-dimensional pictures with full perceptive energy. You look at the parable of the bee, that's a mock-up. And when you look at how the bee creates homes in the mountains and in the trees and what they produce, there's a whole lot of Dianetics just in that alone. We'll hit that at another time. So the word mock-up in Dianetics corresponds to the allegory of the Holy Qur'an. So we have another marriage by Allah's grace. So now let's look at the chain. What is a chain? The regular definition for a chain is a series of metal links or rings connected to or fitted into one another and used for various purposes, such as support, restraint, transmission of mechanical power, or measurement. So when you look at, transmission of mechanical power, if you have a garage door, you have an electric button to open that door, but you have a chain also in case the electricity goes out. You have a mechanical way of actually opening up that garage door, correct?
Yes, sir.
So chains can be used to open up doors, but chains can also be used to restrain them. A chain is something that confines, restrains, or secures. Yes, ma'am.
I'm right. It took me to EU and ROPE in our lessons.
A rope to bind in. Yes, ma'am.
That's right. Yeah. Okay.
And if you clear the word rope in Arabic, I can't remember it off the top of my head. We covered it a couple of weeks ago, but the word rope in Arabic has some connections to Dianetic tech as well.
Wow.
I just can't remember it off the top of my head, but a chain is a series of things linked, connected, or associated together. The synonyms of the word chain is handicap, drag. How the minister taught us, the dragon is something that drags on. That's the dragon. It's an obstacle. It's also a stumbling block. And in the Dianetic tech, that same concept is called a ridge. A ridge. So chains, from the perspective of the Dianetic Technical Dictionary, is a series of recordings of similar experiences. So some of us have recordings in our mind, and we think their recordings belong to us. So sometimes we are our own worst enemy, and and I'm guilty of it myself. I'll be the first to admit it. I'm guilty of it. But sometimes we give ourselves our own worst problems.
Right.
We don't cut ourselves any slack. Go ahead, Sister Angela.
Yes, sir. And as you were talking, I'm seeing the ghost of Christmas past in Ebenezer Scrooge room. But what got me is when you said the drag, you know how the chains on him drags him and binds him. But that was all the things in his past that kept him or made him the way that he was.
So what you're saying is we still walking around here dragging chains. Okay, that's a good picture. That's a good allegorical way of looking at it.
Yes, careful now.
A chain has engrams, secondaries, and locks. So here's where you were going, Sister Angela. There are incidents of similar nature strung out in time. So if I was to say, think about a time when someone tricked you into loaning them some money, you might have an incident that pops in your head automatically. How many people had an incident like that just popped in their head automatically? Anyone? Okay. Then if I said, go back to an earlier one, you could probably go back a little further and find another incident where you loaned someone. So as I'm saying this, there's an image that popped in my head when I came out of basic training back in 1987. I had to stop over at Port Authority to take a bus home, and someone tricked me into giving them some money when I was fresh out of basic training. Now, I haven't thought about that in years, but that's back in 1987. So the mind has a crazy way of traveling the time track as soon as you mention certain things. Again, a series of incidents of similar nature or similar subject matter. So these chains, basically, as Sister Angela pointed out, as you said it, I could see Scrooge walking around, or the ghost from Christmas Past walking around with the chains. I immediately saw that image, and that those chains could represent us in the modern context. The reason why we're dragging our feet is because we have the weight of these chains holding us down. And then it takes me to the minister, Organa,
Right.
a Negro spelled backwards. And I think one of the songs he was singing was something about these chains. Is that one of the songs he was singing in that play? Something about the chains?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
He said the ones that was playing the part was in chains.
Yeah.
Okay. So some of us are Negro spelled backwards, or Negroes that have been turned backwards.
Wow.
So types of chains. Page 363 of Dianetics, L. Ron Hubbard states that engrams, particularly in the prenatal area, are in chains. That is to say, there's a series of incidents of similar types. And if you go into this section of Dianetics, he goes into a whole list of different types of chains. He says this is useful classification because it leads to some solutions. As we audit, you begin to pick up patterns. You begin to pick up patterns of phrases, patterns of statements, patterns in body language, and all these are actually connected to what's holding us back. He also says that the chains one can most easily contact in a pre-clear are the least charged. The most aberrative chains will usually be the hardest to reach because they contain the most active data. So that's from page 363 of Dianetics. In Science of Survival, he states that a chain of engrams may command a manic or depressive aspect in the pre-clear for a particular subject or a column. Now, what does this mean? That means that we say it in Islam, we say the whispering of the slinking devil who whispers into the hearts of men from among the jinn and the men. The way I look at that is the jinn represents the voices that are within, and from the men represents what people whisper on the outside. Does that make sense? And these whispering, he says in Dianetics, are called demon circuits. They have command value on a person. They control what we do. They control where we go. We're driving home, not even thinking about anything. And then all of a sudden, there's a voice in our head that wants us to make a stop before we get home.
Krispy Kreme.
Yeah, you were thinking about the hot sign. What did you say, Angela? The hot sign. So we have these commands, and it happens to me at work all the time. We go out on a call, and while we're out, here comes that voice. Why don't you just make a stop? It happened to me last night. I all of a sudden, potato chips popped in my head. Now I'm at a car accident. Now, how potato chips are connected to a car? And we leave the scene. I'm thinking, I need a bag of chips. I get to the gas station, realize I don't have my wallet. I have no cash in my pocket. So one of the other firefighters says, I can spot your money till we get back. I said, no. I said, the fact that I ain't got it with me means I ain't supposed to have it. So let's just go on back to headquarters. It's that whispering, slinking devil. He says engrams also exist in chains, as will be covered later. He says the engram or chain of engrams provides the basic upon which locks can be accumulated. So these events that took place in our past, these are like ridges, and the locks and the secondaries can accumulate on top of them. That's why someone can say something to us and we ready to just snap, and we don't know why we snap, but we just know something about what that person said just rubbed us the wrong way. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And
Yes,
that
sir.
phrase could be connected to something that we heard while we were in the womb. We don't know. So here we have engrams, key-ins, key-outs, and locks. So the engram, by basic definition, is a mental image picture, which is a recording of a time of physical pain and unconsciousness. It must, by definition, have impact or injury as part of its content. So when you look at the Dianetics videos, they show the woman that I think got hit by the car when she was riding her bike. So you have physical pain and you have unconsciousness. Okay, so that's the engram. So now, as part of that engram, you have the physical pain, you have the unconsciousness, but you have the verbal or whatever was said at that time period recording. So if someone says, don't move, that don't move becomes a command. So now that person goes on in life and now they can't move to get a degree in college. They can't move to go get a job. They can't move to go this, that, and the other. So the reactive mind takes the concept or the verbiage, don't move, literally.
Right.
So they can't move on anything. The secondary is defined as a period of anguish. So now we got emotion connected to this. brought about by a major loss or a threat of loss to the individual. So now, and I'll use it as an example. We had a major rollover car accident last night, and this is just the way it's popping in my head now. So I remember the children, they were aberrated, to say the least, because this was a shock to, you know, we were able to see the footage because there was a camera. The PD is right downstairs from us, so they let us see the video of how it happened. But I could still see the faces of the children. They were there, but they weren't there. And so now they have an engram based on that car accident. But now there's some secondaries that are going to be there also based on that. There's emotion connected to their experience last night. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
So there's a moment of physical pain. Because if you would have seen the vehicle, it would make sense. There was physical pain. There might have been a brief moment of unconsciousness based on the impact. But now the anguish, as I'm seeing the children crying because it shook them up and scared them so much, now they have secondaries. And I know for myself, again, as we're talking, my mind flies, it's flying back and forth on the time track. I was in a serious accident back in 1980, in a car accident. We were traveling back from Florida, and it was my father, myself, and my older sister. And I was asleep in the back seat of the car. And my father was in a hurry trying to get back to New York.
These are downstairs. I don't know that.
He was in a hurry trying to get back to New York, and he fell asleep while he was driving. And I woke up as the car went into the ditch and we went airborne. And so it left an effect on me, because for a number of years I could not fall asleep in a moving vehicle. You know, so that stayed with me for long. If I fell asleep in a moving vehicle and that car just twitched just a little bit, I was wide awake, scared to death, thinking I was back there again.
Right.
That's how the mind works. It took me a long time before I could fall asleep in a moving vehicle based on that car accident. Again, the secondary engram depends for its strength and force upon physical pain engrams, which underline it. So you have an engram and you have a secondary. So this is like another chain. You have an engram, you have a secondary. Then you have what's called the key-in. The key-in is the first time the engram is re-stimulated. The first time it's re-stimulated. Now, the image I keep in my mind is this. If you have a vehicle sitting outside, okay, the vehicle is parked. That vehicle is like an engram, okay? It's there, but it's not doing anything. But if you're a drunk driver, that vehicle has the potential to injure yourself or injure other people, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
so the
sir.
car is the engram. Once you get into the car and turn it on, you've keyed it in, right? So
Yes,
you've
sir.
turned on the engram, but it's not in a dangerous position yet. When you start driving, that's the lock. Now you set the engram into a mode of what's called re-stimulation. Now it's mobile. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we just use the car as a demo kit to explain an engram, a key-in, and a lock. So the key-in is a special kind of lock. It's basically like the first lock on a particular engram. So if you have a chain of locks, the key-in is the first link on that chain. It's a moment when the environment around the awake but fatigued or distressed individual is itself similar to the dormant engram. So have you noticed that when we kind of fall victim to our own shortcomings, we either do it when we're stressed out or we're very, very tired? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So we get stressed out and we say, I'm going to get some ice cream. I'm going to get some cake. I'm going to get this. I'm going to get that. You know. What? Did I touch a nerve?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So we use food. We use food as a way of trying to comfort, and this happens either when we're stressed out or we're fatigued. And I think L. Ron Hubbard calls this anitin, attenuated. I can't remember the full word, but anitin, I think, is when our mindset becomes diminished. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yes.
because we're in high toned, there's certain things we don't think of. Like
Right.
during Ramadan, if we stay busy, we don't even think about eating. But as soon
Right.
as we get angry about something, we get stressed out or we get tired, what happens? It's like this food engram comes up. We just, because now we're going low tone, and that's when the engrams click on.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key in. So at the moment the engram becomes active, it is keyed in and can thereafter be dramatized. So once we go low tone, we hit 2.5 is boredom, and we know an idle mind is a devil's workshop. So whenever we get bored, we're at the doorway, we're at the fork in the road of either let's get busy and work, as the Most High Elijah Muhammad said, work. When you're tired, work. When you're sick, work. Why? Because when you can't work, you're not going to be working and low toned at the same time. So when we don't work, what happens? We go down, now we start going back down memory lane. So we either become angry, we become depressed, we become stressed. And when we get down there, that's when the engrams click on. That's when the locks light up like the Christmas tree that some of us might have, the chain of lights that light up.
Yes, sir, Brother Lumon.
Go ahead.
I remember, I think it was like 5 years ago. I was sitting on the bed just thinking. All this stuff was running through my mind. So I called Sister Angela. And I was just rambling, crying. I was boo-hooing. I mean, snot, boogers, everything. Sister Angela was like, Sister Sharon, go to sleep. It was like, you're tired. And I'm like, go to sleep. I'm not tired. All this stuff is going on with me. You talk about, I'm tired, go to sleep. But, after understanding, it makes sense. When you're like exhausted, the mind is racing, you're looking for food or, just stressed out altogether. But at the end of the day, you're tired, you're bored, something's going on. So now I know. And every night now, almost every night, I always ask my son to make me a cup of tea. And in the morning, I'm like, where did this cup of tea come from? I never even drink the tea because I end up falling asleep.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense.
Okay. All right.
Praise be to the Lord.
You get to a certain age where you begin to appreciate naps.
Right.
I understand. I understand and appreciate the significance of naps now. Sometimes your brain is just tired. You need to unplug for a little bit. Here's a key out. The key out means to release the operating thetan or the OT. It means released from the stimulus response mechanism of the reactive mind. So I'm hoping that over the past year of going through the different Zoom meetings, that some of us have been able to overcome or conquer some of the stimulus response mechanisms that we've had. If we've been able to overcome certain things in our life, then certain things have been keyed out. It means release or separation from one's reactive mind or some portion of it. So if you look back at certain things we did 20 years ago, there's certain things we did 20 years ago we wouldn't even think about doing today. Why? Because we've had some type of a release or separation from that part of our reactive mind from 20 years ago. to see, well, at that time I wasn't Brother Lukman, but to see me pre Nation of Islam, I have a picture of me in my college dorm standing in front of a picture of Public Enemy holding a 40 ounce. You probably couldn't even picture that in your mind. In front of Public Enemy holding the 40 ounce. That was pre-Islam. That part is keyed out. So now we have the lock. The lock is a mental image picture of some of non-painful but disturbing experiences the person has experienced. Okay. So when we look at the news and we see what's happening to us in the streets, those are locks. Some of us have never experienced that. So the lock will take on a different type of energy versus someone who's experienced going through that madness. Seeing it again is like re-stimulating what a person has gone through. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
There's certain shows that if we watch it, there might be something in that show that we've personally experienced, and that causes a re-stimulation. So the locks, they have to depend for their force on secondaries and engrams. So if there's a lock, there has to be a secondary or an engram at the root of it. And again, if we look, remember, engrams are unconsciousness, physical pain, and you have a verbal recording. And then the secondary is where we deal with the emotion. Okay. So a summary, again, Sister Jocelyn, go ahead.
Brother Lukman, I just wanted to offer, just listening to you, a self-realization. As far as blocks and releasing, I found that that I have a better understanding between the difference between guilt and contrition,
Okay.
and how guilt can restrict or constrict, and the contrition. I mean, as far as my relationship with Allah, is it's just a big difference, and just dealing with him with contrition, it has allowed me to be over time, be more forgiving, because and being more receptive to his forgiveness, and then being receptive to his forgiveness is opening me up to be more forgiving. So I just realized how how constricting guilt can be, and that was hindering me from accepting and receiving Allah's forgiveness. So I guess in hindsight and listening to you, it sounds like guilt would definitely be a lock. So that's what I offer that.
Yes, ma'am. As you were speaking, the image that Sister Angela gave us earlier, is a picture of us in our own chains. Some of us carry around our own guilt that Allah has already forgiven us for. That's number one. Number two, the Most High Elijah Muhammad says in Message to the Black Man, that whenever you make your prayers, those prayers wipe away the sins that you made in between that prayer and the one before it. But some of us are still carrying around things that we've done, and Allah has already, the minister says, our sins have been thrown away into the ocean of forgiveness.
Merciful God.
So Allah takes the chains, and we go and take the chains and we put them back. Picture this in your mind. Picture this in your mind. This is us. Now, how insane is this picture? Here's a mock-up for us. We're all in solitary confinement in our own cell. Okay, can you see yourself sitting in the cell?
No, I'm just playing.
No, picture yourself in the cell.
Okay.
There's nothing there but the bed you're sitting on, a sink, and a toilet. Okay, picture yourself in that cell, solitary confinement. The key is right there next to you to the door. And you and I choose to stay in there. And we feel that we can't get out. And the key is right there with us in the cell. Is that insanity or what?
Absolutely.
Allah has already forgiven us from when I was taught that as soon as you come in the nation, whatever you did prior to the nation, all that was wiped away just by coming to the nation and writing your letter. So we still carry around stuff we did before the teachings, before we came to the nation, and that's already been, that, you know, we need to let that go.
Praise Allah.
Allah said he makes all things new, right?
These all things new, but he takes the chains and we keep going to Allah. Oh, Allah, please help me. And then we take the chains from him and put them back on. So the engram. So I'm listing this in a chain. This is like a cycle of action. You have an engram. Go ahead, Sister Deborah L.
Yes, sir. In study group the other night, Friday, I had made a comment, and I'm just listening to the discourse, and it's in line with what you're saying. And my comment was in reference to the question in the study guide number 19 about the process by which Allah would go about perfecting his or perfecting the human being. And so from the reading, he said that there will be perfect human beings. And I think before I'd shared with you all, I guess you would call it cognition on the definition of the word perfect. And so perfect, we think that that's without flaw, you know, no defect. So when we say perfect, we have one concept that comes up in our minds. But I notice a lot of times, especially we in the Nation of Islam, we tend to, in my opinion, to be so hard on ourselves, trying to come up to this, I think it's a self-created idea of what perfection is. And so the word perfect also means complete or completed. And in the instructions to the laborers, number 3, I think it is, it talks about speaking the language in the proper tense. Yes, number 3. And it speaks about the perfect tense. And then it says Allah will make us into a new and perfect people. But if we use the whole qualifier, which you talked about, grammar and tense, perfect, future perfect, and present perfect tense, is actually has to do with projecting into the future. It has to do with how you can state something in the past, but it really is pointing to the future. And so I'm saying that to say that we're incomplete, but yet in our process of becoming. And a lot of times I think our self-talk has become so hard that we've, in some respects, even have taken on the narrative. I think it goes further than just, you know, in the mother's womb. I think that we have a collective engram from slavery, because sometimes our self-talk and how hard we are on ourselves, it goes further back than just, you know, things that have happened within our physical lifetimes, or even things that happen with our parents. I think it goes a lot further back, that we're trying to break chains and psychological images, like Dr. Naeem Akbar talks about, of slavery. And so I'm just saying that, you know, if we stop trying to live up to this idea of what being perfect is, and understand that we are born complete yet incomplete, and Allah is trying to complete us, instead of us looking at being, you know, perfect, and we cut corners, and we, you know, we always say the right thing, and we never do the improper thing. That is just an unrealistic idea that I think we put on ourselves. So therefore, if we don't meet that idea of what perfection means, you know, we just beat ourselves up so badly. And so I just think that that's something that we need to think about personally.
Yes, ma'am, you're right and exact. We really need to cut ourselves some slack. And I think if we cut ourselves some slack, you know, that will take a great weight off our own shoulders. Go ahead, Sister Jocelyn.
I wanted to thank Sister Deborah for that, because she just opened up something. Because I always, when I read the Quran, when it said that Allah will perfect His light, though the polytheists be adverse, I know that's it's talking about us, that He's going to perfect our light. It's not just the God, but us as individuals, as we perfect our light. But when she says becoming complete, and like this process that we're dealing with right now, everything that we do when we come together, it's evolving us towards that completion. And as each and one of us, grow and grow and grow and grow and get to that completion where we are, I think the completion is our connection. And when we discipline ourselves to be in total submission to the will of Allah, I think that's going to be our completion. But just listening, it gave me a clearer understanding of what that meant when Allah says that He will perfect His light, because this light is going to be perfected through us. And no matter there's nothing going to stop it, because that's His will and it's going to happen. But and when we submit to His will, then that's when, from my understanding, that's when we will become complete. But thank you, Sister Deborah. I really, really appreciate that.
Praise due to Allah. So now, engram is at the root. Then you have the secondary. Then you have the key in. And then you have the lock. So that's kind of like a chain or a cycle of action. This is the cycle of aberration. Engram, secondary, key in, and then lock. And restimulation would be in there as well. So this in and of itself forms a chain. Now I want to use, I got a little video. And in the video, here's how I want you to mock this up in your mind. In the video, the spider is going to represent the reactive mind. The spider web is going to be the engram.
Mhm.
And the way it's going to show how the spider makes the web. The web itself is going to be the chain. These are all the different chains that will catch the fly. The fly represents theta. The fly that's in the web, when the fly is free, that's theta. When the fly is stuck in the web, that's considered interbulated theta or in theta. That's the I, a quote unquote I, or the spiritual being that's now stuck in the mess, okay? Mm-hmm. The web itself is going to be made up of chains. When you see how the spider makes the web, it's going to be made up of chains. So the fly hitting the web, that's the key in. Does that make sense? The fly hitting the web is the key in. And then when the spider starts encasing the fly, that's considered the lock. So can you kind of picture that in your mind? Mm-hmm. You have the engram, you have the fly hitting the web, that's the key in, and then the spider catches the fly, that's the lock. And that's how we are in our own mind. We are locked into the chains of our own mind, our own thinking. Our own mind is like a spider's web. So I'm just going to show this video real quick. Let's see. It was right here. Those are all the chains. Remember anchor points.
Mm.
Here's the key in. Now, what does the reactive mind do? And here's the lock. So now that fly becomes interbulated theta.
Mm. Wow.
That makes sense?
A whole lot of sense.
Absolutely.
So now when you understand what the spider does, the minister taught this one time, the spider injects chemicals into the fly. And what that does is he injects enzymes into the fly, and those enzymes dissolve the inside of the fly, and the spider sucks the liquefied organs of the fly out. So when you look at the spider web, all you see is the shell or the outer the exterior portion of the fly, but inside it's all hollow. That's the same thing that the reactive mind does to us. It sucks the life out of us. And then we become a shell of a person. But on the inside, we're just empty. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So changing the Holy Qur'an. Here's where we're going to start to do a little landing. See if we can find some marriages, but there's only going to be one specific ayat we're going to dissect. Allah says in the Holy Qur'an, and thou will see the guilty that they link together in chains. Their shirts made of pitch and fire covering their faces. And Allah may repay each soul what it has earned. Surely Allah is swift in reckoning. We could say this is an allegory. This is a picture. Because I can't see us linked together in chains, and then we have shirts. We have shirts that are made of tar. That's just that. To me, that's an allegory. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
And when they are cast into a narrow place, I won't do it tonight, but when you take narrow place and you clear that word in Arabic, takes you right into Dianetics. In chains, they will pray for destruction. I think narrow place is also synonymous with confusion or aberration. Surely we have placed on their necks chains reaching up to the chins, so they have their heads raised aloft. And we have set a barrier before them and a barrier behind them. Thus we have covered them. When you clear this ayat and you look at the barrier before them and the barrier behind them, the way I was looking at that was the barriers represent ridges. And these individuals are unable to travel back on the time track going backwards, and they're unable to postulate into the future. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So a part of aberration is your time track becomes occluded, so you can't travel back, and then you can't postulate into the future. You can't travel back, you can't go forward, so you're stuck right there.
Mm-hmm.
And to be in the present time, that's, he considered that neurosis. So this is the verse we're going to deal with. These are they who disbelieve in their Lord, and these have chains on their necks, and they're the companions of the fire. They're just supposed to be in it, they will abide. So that's Holy Qur'an, Surah 13, verse 5. So what we're going to deal with specifically is this. What could the Lord, who could the Lord be? What are the chains? And what is the significance of chains on their neck? Very interesting allegory. But when you look at our Lord, here's a question. Lord is Rab or Rabbi. It means one that has command or authority. The word Rabib means stepfather or foster father. Question, could the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan be found under this title?
Yes, sir.
Could he be considered Lord?
Mm-hmm.
When we understand that he was put as the father over the house, or he was put in command or authority over us, if we understand that the word Lord does not mean creator of the heavens and the earth, then we can understand that this term could be used to describe the minister. Can we all agree on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, is there anyone that would disagree with that? Okay, so now that being the case, if so, could those who disbelieve in their Lord be those who went against the decision to study the text?
Absolutely.
Just a thought. Just a thought. Just a what if. Those who disbelieve in their Lord are going to have chains on their necks. That's what the ayat says, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now, what would be the result of not listening to the minister in comparison to the chains on the necks? Is there a marriage between not obeying the minister's instruction and the chains on the necks? Let's look at this. Chains on the necks. In Arabic, it's aglalu fi anakahim. The key word here, aglalu, means to insert, to stick, or to penetrate, kind of like a needle in the brain. So the word chain also means to insert something. It means to be filled with hatred. It means to have rancor, spite, or malice. So now we're at tone 2.0, 1.5, and 1.1. So here, the chain on the neck is an allegory, we could say possibly, for an emotional state. Could we agree on that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the chain, we're looking at this like a parable, a simile, or a metaphor. Because we know, we don't see no one walking around with chains on their necks right now, unless you're talking about necklaces, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what is this allegorical chain that individuals will be wearing on their neck? It means to have a burning thirst. So these are all the meanings of the Arabic word. See, when you go into the Holy Qur'an, it gives us a deeper understanding of the Dianetics. Well, how is this connected to Dianetics, Brother Lukman? Check this out. What could the chain on the neck illustrate? Now, when this popped in my head, I got goosebumps. This was actually really interesting. So what organ or gland is found in the neck?
Thyroid.
The thyroid. The thyroid gland. Thyroid gland. So now the chain on the neck could be an allegorical representation of the effect of low-toned emotions on the physical body. Thyroid healing. Does this make sense?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yes,
so,
sir.
Yes, sir.
so we could say we have summed up in one ayat a representation of how low-tone emotional responses actually have a physical effect on the human body through the neck. Chains on the neck. So then I did a little research. The thyroid and low-toned emotions. It says low-tone emotional states can ill affect the thyroid gland. So if we're constantly angry, if we're constantly antagonistic or hostile, we are producing through our thought a chemistry that ill affects the thyroid gland. Brother Wadud, you can jump in at any time that you want on this one, brother. But now, low-tone emotional states can ill affect the thyroid gland, but there's a cycle here. The thyroid gland can produce hormones that manifest as low-tone emotional states. So if you have low-tone emotional states that ill affect the thyroid gland, and the thyroid gland produces hormones that produce low-tone emotional states, then you get stuck in what? A cycle of chronic restimulation. Just by being angry all the doggone time. So we're stuck in a loop. In Buddhism, it's called samskara. Samskara is a cycle that you can't get out of. It's just over and over and over again. So when you look at hypo, which means low thyroidism, you have loss of appetite, lack of concentration, difficulty sleeping, reduced motivation, mood swings, short temper, and depression. All of those could be considered chains on the neck. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's hypothyroidism. But then you have hyperthyroidism, which means too much. And it produces panic attacks, anxiety, sleep disturbances, short temper, and impatience. So we could possibly say that all of this is based on low-toned emotional states that's based upon aberrated thought. Thought, emotion, and effort. The thought produces the chemistry, which is emotion, and that emotion ill affects the body, which is the effort or effect. Go ahead, Sister Glenda.
That last thing you just gave, I didn't mean to say it, the thyroid, the mother of hormones, it sounds like. The because of that, does that, what I was gonna ask, what causes that? The last one.
Hyperthyroidism?
Yes.
Well, let's go a little further. Go a little further because I'm gonna answer your question. And then if I don't answer it, let me know, and we'll ask the good doctor to take us a little bit deeper into that. Okay. The one thing he says in Dianetics, he says these fluids and secretions, testosterone, estrogen, adrenaline, thyroid, parathyroid, and he called it pituitrin. I think that might have been what they called it back then in the 50s, et cetera, are the substances the mind uses as one means of controlling the body. They form relay circuits, so to speak. Each one has its own action within the body. But now let's go a little deeper. And I think here's where we're going to answer your question, Sister Glenda. On womenshealthnetwork.com, there's an article called The Biology of Anger. And it states that conventional medical thinking on the thyroid and emotions has always been a one-way street. If your thyroid is underactive, it will make you depressed or cause mood swings. If it's overactive, it can make you anxious, angry, or manic. But none of the body's systems are one-way streets. If a poorly functioning thyroid causes negative emotions, then why can't negative emotions impair the thyroid? Well, we now have the evidence to explain how this can occur. So, Sister Glenn, I think this might answer your question. Let's start by looking at what anger does to the body. So what they're saying is the thyroidism it originates, if you look at it as a cycle of action, the start is anger. So let's start by looking at what anger does to the body. At the most basic level, anger is a threat response. The fight or flight. The experience of anger is associated in part with the chemistry of stress hormones, cortisol, norepinephrine, and epinephrine, which most of us know as adrenaline. Cortisol is the most important of these to thyroid function. It's long been known that cortisol can influence thyroid stimulating hormone, which is called TSH, and that excessive cortisol can suppress TSH. So what this means is the more anger we have, the more we carry around anger, the more it produces a chemical in the body, which will suppress, so we have a chain of events taking place, which then will cause the thyroid to produce less of its key hormones. Chronic cortisol release from ongoing stress can also tip the scale toward autoimmune thyroid disease. So at the root of the thyroid problem is chemical, and at the root of the chemistry is emotion. Does that answer your question, Sister Glenda?
Yes, sir. I think I'm ill.
I'm not laughing at you, but are you saying because you have well, let's put this, are there some anger things that are present?
Well, I don't know if I'm angry, but I know sometimes I can fly off the handle when somebody may say, I could be fine.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something that person can say and I just get ticked off and I don't understand why,
but okay.
I am,
Okay.
So.
Sister Angela? Get that sister's number.
Oh, I have it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Sister Sharon.
Oh, yes, sir. I was gonna say it. The pituitary gland also affects the thyroid from the research that I've been doing. So from what I've read, it starts with the pituitary gland.
Mm-hmm.
And because the pituitary gland is part of the endocrine system, and it sends out more hormones or less hormones, depending on what form of the thyroid dis-ease you have. So
if you look at the lesson that says what is the meaning of CAPT period and LIEUT period, what's the meaning of captain and lieutenant?
Yes, sir.
The pituitary gland is the captain. That's the master gland. And like we could say all the other glands are like the lieutenants. So what you're saying is absolutely right. The pituitary gland is actually giving instructions to the thyroid, and the thyroid is doing what it's doing, but it begins with the pituitary. Brother Wadu, can you verify or give us a little more backup on that, just to some more info on that? Make sure we're in the right direction.
You're absolutely correct. And I'm sitting here contemplating and trying to think of some way of putting things in terms that are less convoluted as medical language can be.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
And as we've talked about previously, it's unfortunate, or by the design of this system that we live in, that we don't study medicine in the medical schools in a interconnected, holistic way to incorporate the emotional impact on the hormones and which hormones are affected and how that impacts other organs or glands within the body. So there's no coincidence that I'm actually employing a thyroid therapy to some patients of mine, and that therapy hasn't been based from the emotional aspect of why they may have hypo or hyperthyroidism, but from the aspect of the nutritional deficiency in the environment.
Right.
Because that main ingredient that the thyroid needs is deplete in the environment, and many people may be deplete in this chemical. And it's by the design of the system in which we live.
Yes, sir.
To make us aberrated or have low output from the thyroid. But everything that you've already outlined is absolutely correct and on point.
Praise be to Allah. Thank you, Brother Wadu. Go ahead, Sister Angela.
Yes, sir. When you first asked the question, even going back to when you were in Lord and its meaning Father, and do we see Minister Farrakhan in that meaning? And some of us, when we speak about him, we'll say Pop or Dad or my spiritual father, and how it relates to the instruction of Dianetics. And then you asked the question about the chain on the neck, and I went straight to spiritual. Immediately, it came to me that Allah is closer to us than our jugular vein, which is in our neck.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
And the jugular vein is so critical that anything that interrupts that is a life and death situation. So the instruction the minister gave us, and when you asked about those that decided not to take on the instructions, although the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, go where he said go. He said, when you see him, look at him. When he speaks, or when you hear him, listen to him. Go where he said go, and stay away from where he say stay away from. As a member of the Nation of Islam, that's a prerequisite, saying that the minister is the divine comforter, guide, Messiah in our midst. So those who choose not to follow the instructions are right back to the ghost of Christmas past. Because I see the dragging of the old, that the chains don't got you being able to go up into the storehouse, which is up here, because this is the main vein from the heart to the brain. Provides blood to the brain, and if tampered with, can cause a life or death situation. That's how I connected it spiritually. It's truly a life or death situation. I think I love the thyroid, and because that shows the mercy of Allah. Even us having a slow, maybe I'll get audited, maybe I'll do this, but eventually when it get dark, it's gonna be a very critical situation.
Yes, ma'am. All right, praise be to Allah. Sister Glenda.
Fellow Dr. Gupta,
Abdul,
excuse me. I was told that sugar wasn't the reason for what you was talking about. I was listening to Dr. Brother talking about diet, and then what you were speaking of, the hypo, was it not hypo or hyper? I get the two mixed up. Sugar, does sugar cause that? I was told that it does that.
Well, the way sugar works in the body, and the term that we are most familiar with, it's not saying that anyone is diabetic, but just an excess of sugar. It's not necessarily the sugar itself, though we know the negative impacts of white sugar, but the way the metabolism of the body is organized. And in this particular slide of the cortisol, the sugar impacts what's called adipose tissue. And adipose tissue is the same tissue that will increase the cortisol levels. And thereby you see how, since the cortisol has an impact on the thyroid and the sugar impacts the cells that produce or cause the excess cortisol, then you can follow that chain to why that would impact your thyroid. Does that make sense?
Yes. Now, what if it's, I'm not talking about white sugar. What if it's grain that goes into the body? That
If
turns
it's
into
what that
sugar?
goes in the body, I'm sorry.
Grain, you know, like wheat.
Okay.
And
So,
I was told.
Yes, ma'am. So some foods have sugars in them outside of fruits. We know that fruits have a fructose, which is a variant of a sugar, and then carbohydrates. That's probably what they may have been referring to in terms of the wheat, because wheat has a little less than like your pastas, but there may be a negligible amount. But then, as I heard Brother Dr. Keeley teaching from How to Eat to Live, and God in person told the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad that whole wheat bread, milk, and navy beans are staples that give us life. So I go by that first, because God knows the intricacies that modern Western medicine is only attempting to learn in present time. So I would stay away from the pastas, which are carbohydrate heavy, but the wheat itself, I would still embrace eating wheat.
Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
trying
You're
to
welcome.
put my hand down.
Okay. All right. So let's land this plane. We gotta. The article continues to say that the burst of cortisol shouldn't impact thyroid function under normal circumstances, because bursts of stress hormones should be short-lived. So the hormones have their positive aspects, but they're not designed to stay in the body long-term. Says, but in the modern world, we're constantly under threat from a barrage of sources, especially conflicts and demands that seem to never go away, and problems that can't be solved. So our fight or flight response is almost constantly turned on. So we're talking about, in the language of Dianetics, we're talking about chronic restimulation. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
It says, since there's no respite from this stress, suppression of thyroid function becomes more and more likely to. And this fight response does not more than just suppress the thyroid hormone output. It can also trigger an immune response, which can do damage to the thyroid itself. So what happens is, the more, if you ever notice the minister's demeanor, it always seems as though he's in a calm, he just has a calm demeanor.
Mm-hmm.
So like he says, you create your own atmosphere. But when we constantly are at the point where we want to fight with this and fight with that and argue with this and argue with this and argue with this, we're actually keeping our system in a sense, a burning building pops in my head. Your body is on fire. And then I think about how in our lessons, it talks about turning the keys, and then it talks about the rusty locks. And then when you look at rust is oxidation, which is really slow burning. So if we have these locks, we are being burned slowly. And if you look in the Holy Qur'an, it talks about these chains, but it also talks about, and the face was on fire, or the body was on. So fire is connected to this restimulative process. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So we're burnt. So no matter where we go, you can't get away from the fire, because wherever we go, we bring the fire with us. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So we can go from state to state. We can go from relationship to relationship. Whatever you burned before, you're going to burn it wherever we go. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Now, we're going to end this plane on this autoimmune disease. So the chain on the neck that's given to us in the Holy Qur'an is connected to the thyroid, which we then connect to autoimmune disease. How is autoimmune disease related to Islam? How does it connect to Islam? Autoimmune disease is seen through, or it's manifested as a person is always tired. They have achy muscles, low-grade fever, trouble concentrating, arthritis, multiple sclerosis, means they have trouble walking. And it translates to our lessons as cannot walk up to the store, pain in all joints, fever, ways or thinks other than self, can't concentrate, rheumatism, cannot walk. So could this be related? Could the chains on the neck be an allegorical representation for the signs and symptoms for hypo and hyperthyroidism? That's number one. Number two, could this be connected to the illnesses described in the problem book? Could Dianetic technology be the solution to solving the problems of the uncles and the wife of W.D. Farrar?
Yes, sir.
Is all this connected? The chain on the neck in the Holy Qur'an, the chains found in Dianetics connected to the low-toned, and now we're talking about the manifestation of the disease given to us in the problem book. So how do we solve the problem of the first uncle? Could we just teach him how to let go of the chains? The Buddha said it like this: holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. So we carry around these emotions. We're angry, we're antagonistic, covert hostility, overt hostility with regards to individuals. Those individuals are either dead or they're no longer in our environment. And the anger that we hold against them is only burning us. If you notice, Minister Farrakhan doesn't hold on to anger. And people that have ill-treated him, he'll still turn around and help them. Why? Because that's one way of letting go of the anger. And that's why he looks the way he does at the age of 80 and some change, and why Brother Lukman is in his 50s and I have more gray hair than he's got, because I hold on to anger and he lets it go. So low-toned emotional states are like poison that only harm the consumer. And that's why Allah says in the Holy Quran, when certain things happen, you know, there's certain way you can react. But if you forgive, it's better for you. Some of us may have said, how is forgiving better for me? This right here. If we forgive and let stuff go, it's better for us. If that person continues the behavior that they have, karma comes for everybody. And but some of us want to be there when karma, we want to see we want to be there, we want to witness it. No, let that person deal with Allah in his own way, and let us let go of certain things so we don't carry around these chains, as Sister Angela was describing. We don't become the ghost of Christmas past. Couldn't Lot's wife be considered a ghost of Christmas past?
Yes, sir.
Isn't that like Lot's wife?
Mm-hmm.
She was stuck in the past because she had some chains that kept her to Sodom and Gomorrah. And that is where we will end it. Does anyone have any questions, thoughts, concerns, suggestions, or comments?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Yes, sir, Brother Frank again. Brother, I want to thank Allah and thank you for unlocking my Supreme Wisdom book for me. I mean, you making it plain now. I can see it clear. because I was been struggling with it forever. But you know, coming to classes like this, I mean, that's why I'm just quiet, because I'm trying to soak it in, and the way that Allah blessing you to get it over, brother, that's mastery. And I, for one, appreciate it. I pray Allah that you give you the strength to continue on, the zeal and the right mind to do so. But I'm going to ask if you have in your possession that way to read the Quran, not the Quran, wow. Read the Supreme Wisdom in 7 days. If you have that on a PDF or something, I would love that. But if not, I can continue to do it the way I'm doing. But like I said, I just again want to salute you, brother. I thank Allah and thank you for it. Continue, sir. Thank you.
Praise be to Allah, brother. Thank you for that. I'm aberrated like everyone else. So there's some days I beat myself down and but there's something inside that says, based on our limitations right now, this is my way of giving back. So putting together these PowerPoints and doing the study, if this is something I can do that the believers can benefit from, then I'm at this point, I'm just thankful to Allah that He can use me in the manner that will allow us all to get more understanding of what we have. So Brother Frank, deeply, I appreciate those words. I thank you, and I give thanks and praise to Allah for everything. And I just wrote a note down. I will send out via email the 7-day reading schedule that Mother Tainetta Muhammad used to follow. I'll send that out to the believers. If you like a copy of that, go ahead and put your email in the chat, and I'll make sure you get a copy of that as well. I have Sister Glenda, Brother Wadud, and then Sister Barbara. Sister Glenda, you have the floor.
Yes, I can't seem that every time I try to chat something, it won't go through. But I was going to ask you, can I get a recording of this segment right here?
I will either send a recording or I will send everyone a copy of the PowerPoint.
Okay, yes,
the
sir.
recordings take up a lot of memory. I'll try to get everyone a copy of the recording, but if not, I can send you the PowerPoint with all the notes and all the references, and I'll make sure you get that as well.
Okay, I'm gonna try to send my email and see if it works. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Brother Wadud.
Sir, throughout the discussion and teaching tonight, a cognition is how white people have studied nature, as you showed the illustration of the spider, and designed mechanisms to trap our minds by way of subliminal messages. And so, as we are also talking about the thyroid, the anger, and the cortisol, the body is not set up to have a lot of what we call positive feedback systems. It mostly has negative feedback systems. But what anger will produce is a cycle where the anger causes us maybe to become stressed, and then we go eat. If we eat, we increase our adipose tissue. If we increase our adipose tissue, we increase our cortisol. If we increase our cortisol, then we decrease our thyroid function. That's one cycle that's a positive feedback. And being in America as Black people, they set it up so that we potentially could always be angry. So we have to thank Allah for coming and giving us the door to be able to come out of always being angry. And then they have also incorporated that they depleted the food supply with the nutrients necessary for the thyroid and other glands to be able to function properly as well, which further perpetuates that cycle of aberration and dysfunction throughout the body. So I thank you for making that connection, Brother Lukeman. Thank you.
Praise be to Allah. And the solution to that cycle you just mentioned is fasting. Something just that simple, just fasting. Disrupts that whole positive feedback loop. Fasting stops it. Praise be to Allah. Go ahead, Sister Barbara.
I'm sorry. Assalamu alaikum. Brother Luke, I'm like Sister Glenda. Is there any way, what you told Sister Glenda about the recording, but you would send the PowerPoint points and notes? This one right here, I mean, I was really, truly just engaged. I mean, I couldn't move. I wanted to get up, but this one right here, so I know it helped me a lot. I just want to say thank Allah for it and praise be to Allah. Thank you.
Thank you for your words, sister. All praises due to Allah. All right, with that being said and done, we a little over time. We gotta, those of us that are gonna go into the next closing the gap at 8 o'clock, we'll go ahead and close this out so we can make it and show our support for our family. With that being said and done, let's go ahead and close this out. Anyone who wants a copy, please put your email in the chat. I'll make sure you get it. But let's go ahead and close out in prayer. Attention prayer. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, Lord of the worlds, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful, Master of the Day of Judgment in which we now live. Thee alone do we serve, thy aid do we seek. Please, Allah, guide us on the straight path, the path upon whom thou hast bestowed favors, not the path upon whom thy wrath is brought down, nor of those who go astray after they have heard thy teaching. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum, family. Until next
Thanks
time.
again.
Salam, sir. Thank you so much.
Salam,
Stay
sir. Thank
strong,
you.
stay safe, stay healthy. Until next time.
Alaikum salam.
Thank you so much.